Hi everyone and welcome to our session this morning in relation to global expansion ecosystems. I'm going to start with introducing myself and the rest of the panel and then we will go on. So I'm Khadeeja and I head up global mobility at Aggreko. I've been within in-house global mobility teams for the best part of 16 years with a few months at a Big Four. Asma, do you want to?
I think everyone knows me by now, so no need for an introduction. I'll pass on.
I'm Emily Stewart, so I'm the VP of Operations at Centuro, and I joined the team with 15 years of global mobility experience from tax to immigration to data, and so, yeah, just looking forward to changing, disrupting.
Morning everyone, I'm Chris Hall. I am the Managing Director for Global Tax Network on the East Coast of America. I've been doing this for 26 years this summer, which bores myself, to be honest.
Thanks, Chris. I'm Richard Watts-Joyce. I'm the founding partner of the Global Tax Network office in the UK. We founded the UK office back in 2000, so we've been going for a while as well. Working with GTN US and our other colleagues, Global Mobility Services for employers with mobile workforces.
My name is Arun, Nagratha, also Ernie, same guy, two names. We started our firm, my partners and I, back in 2002. I'm the managing director of the global mobility practice, mainly handling Canadians that live and work abroad.
Brilliant, thank you. So, as I mentioned, the topic is about collaborative working across multifunctional organisations. So, as an in-house head of mobility, we are facing quite a lot of challenges in terms of providing the best service to our business and looking at the technology that was just shown to everybody just now. You've obviously come together to build an ecosystem. So I wanted to actually start with asking you, so how did you find yourselves on this path to actually building a collaborative partnership for client work? So should I start with yourself, Asma?
Yeah, no problem. So basically at Centuro as a business, I think that my personal sort of experience is legal. I've worked in the field of immigration, commercial, legal for a number of years. And I guess, similarly, I've worked with large multinational companies over the years, and the challenges have been very similar. Right, so you've only got the very large consulting firms that can actually offer a solution. And so if you look at how technology has transformed, we've talked about the metaverse, the AI, everything since yesterday, it's transformation, going forward and forward thinking. So how do we as a company then keep up with the trends and keep up with the demands of what the next generation of workforce is looking for? So the vision for the technology that we're creating is really trying to embrace new technology, new things that people want, and maybe make it easy for them to work. So if you think about what Dan just talked about, I mean, fascinating discussion about employee engagement and how to speed things up. If we don't keep up, we will be left behind. And I think so many companies are trying to innovate, trying to create tools and solutions, but are they actually really addressing the problem that's at hand? So the idea behind the tool that we're creating in conjunction with GCN is that there is no tool on the market that addresses tax and immigration as a joint effort. Mm-hmm. There is nothing on the market that even brings the legal aspect of employment law into it. So that's what we're trying to create. And I think when we look at AI, and I think Daniel mentioned that, is a company truly looking at AI in its correct form? Well, I can say that the reason why we've collaborated together in creating this ecosystem is that the data is led by the experts themselves. So we're not finding this data generically. It's been verified, it's been confirmed, and that's the vision that we're trying to create.
Brilliant. Emily, would you like?
Yeah, I think, so obviously the technology is the main focus of the conversation, but I think it also goes back to the partnership, the collaboration between, you have GTN and Trowbridge, who are sort of best-in-class tax experts around the world for global mobility tax. And then we're working on best-in-class immigration experiences. And we're coming together because a lot of our clients today, for the past probably 5 to 8 years, have been asking us to, when we're responding to a proposal or working on any piece of work together, they say, how collaborative will you be? Will you work with the partners we already have? Are you going to share information? Are you going to make this a seamless experience for us? And so instead of trying to do absolutely everything in-house, we're just partnering as the best firms around the world that can do this service, leveraging the technology that we're building together. And I think actually this story probably starts before Centuro and GTN became involved, and it probably starts more with the GTN and the Trowbridge relationship, right?
Yeah, if I think back to around 2002, 2003, when we got started, I think we realized at that time, even before we were in this whole space with technology, that unless we were able to provide our service seamlessly to a client within other countries, we weren't going to be able to compete with the big four. And I think that's how I came in touch with GTN at that time, realizing, look, it's a very simple need. You've got, let's say, a Canadian going to the UK. They're going to want to come to one stop and be able to handle that, but also add on other countries seamlessly. And I think that we do pretty well, or at least it's been working out for the last 20 years. I think now we're going into a very different phase with technology where the client, if they can get more with one stop and be able to cover off all those different segments of what they're needing to deal with for their employees, that's really what they're looking for. It's not just about tax anymore.
Richard, Chris, do you have anything to add?
I think, well, I'm the newbie here. I've only been with GTN for 13 and a half years.
Only.
Yeah, I came to the party late, but I think, when I stepped out of the Big Four, I think, it's one of the things that was always you go for drinks with your mates and say, can we do this on our own? Can we break this out? But part of that global network was always the thing that would hold you back. Because it's like, then we have to go find people in Singapore and we have to do that. So the opportunity to go to GTN was great. That network was always established. But one thing we've always seen in the market is like, well, your network doesn't look strong enough. And I think the ability and technology to allow us to put the controls around not just tax, but immigration, employment law, all of that is really allowing sort of a new group of people to come into the market and give options to clients like yourself. And that's excellent.
Brilliant. So what are your clients asking for in relation to, the demands from providers, etc.? What are you seeing that they're asking for, and how does this answer that, would you say?
Yeah, I can go for that one. So that kind of ties in with why we're working together. We've been providing global mobility tax services in the UK for over 20 years. And from a very small business to a team now, we have 25 people specialising in this area. But we've had to sort of evolve along the path as well. And as Ernie said, we're only as strong as the strength of our collaborating partners globally. We've got some here from Brazil and Australia and other countries, which is great. But as we evolve, we constantly listen to our clients, constantly ask them, what is it you need from us? Let's not try and guess what we can provide, or just because we can do something, we should try and do that. And that's how we've kind of worked at GTN since day one. One of the things we were hearing a lot of was, well, it's great, the global mobility tax side is covered. We found best-in-class providers globally, but actually we need combined services that link it with other providers. So we were getting a lot of requests for tax and immigration as a combined service. And this is when we started really working with Centuro and said, we need global immigration, and you look a bit like us. We've got best-in-class providers around the world in tax. You've got the same in immigration. Why don't we sort of do something together? Jumped on a few calls and actually had a couple of RFPs together, and just realised that one was the culture very similar, but we were both trying to do the same thing. And if we could just link those two things together, it was going to provide quite a dramatic shift in services we could provide and the type of clients we could service. And linking the technology, all our clients say, well, if I tell you I want to move 4 people from UK to Italy, which is now more of a problem post-Brexit than it used to be, and you give me the tax answer, I don't really want to then go and phone up Asma and Emily and say, I'm going to move 4 people to Italy, and then you get the immigration answer. All they want to do is they want to tell us what they're doing, and they want us to share that information and come back with the combined answer that saves the client, and I'm sure you'll find this as well, Khadeeja, that saves you a bunch of time as well and speeds up
Absolutely.
you get those answers.
Absolutely, and what we don't want to do is necessarily act like a post box. So trying to collate all of the information together, where if you can talk to each other and come back to us with one kind of solution or one way of doing things, that would really help us, because we know it's more trusted and you're not relying on us to analyse something and come up with it and then present it. We know that when we get the response and feedback from yourselves, we can present it in the way that it is, and it will be a holistic response rather than just relying on us to interpret something. Because as much as we are experts in-house for our business stakeholders, for us you are all experts, and we rely on yourselves as true, to be true partners and understand our business and give us the advice in a simpler way than we could kind of have to spend months trying to collate. So on that note, I just want to ask, what are the general industry trends that you're seeing that has kind of brought you to this trajectory and this pipeline in terms of what you're looking to do? Emily, would you be able to?
Yeah, absolutely. There are quite a few sort of big global mobility think tanks in the industry that prepare reports on an annual basis. And one of the big trends that's come out this year is that 75% of companies are trying to leverage better technology or have better technology built for them that supplies these needs. And so I think looking into that, a lot of the technology that has existed up until now or is currently being designed is very limited in its range from who is actually building it. So you get technology that can solve one problem but not all of the problems. And that really calls back to the collaborative model, where you need a network of great global mobility tax experts that can review the tax data to build out the most efficient tax tool. But then you need that tool to speak to the immigration tool that's been built by the network of amazing immigration experts around the world. And then you need that to also speak to the legal tool that exists for the employment contracts that's built by the best legal network. And I think that's the main challenge and the main solution that we're working together on. Is it really is the industry is made up of individual and great best-in-class firms in different industries around the world. And if you want that best service and you want that best bespoke answer, then you have to work with all of those firms. But of course, companies want a single point of contact. They want to work through that filter. They don't want to talk to 500 people around the world, because you become that post box. So the trends are that they want the technology that supports for them to access those best-in-class experts.
And I think the other thing to add there is user experience, right? So employee experience, employee engagement, getting the best talent on board as quickly as possible requires you to have that smooth transition into being able to get to where you want to get to. And yesterday we had the debate on entity setup, EOR. EOR is a phenomenon right now, right? So people wanting to deploy people in a country where they don't have an entity, work permits, tax liability, permanent establishment, it's all an issue. Penalties, fines, and people don't know. You go to a large consultancy, you're still spending tens of thousands of pounds to get a report. So the idea behind the technology is really to empower companies, to make it simple, to make it accessible. If technology is making it easy for people to, get to that ChatGPT as an example, if that is becoming so accessible, it's democratized the ability for people to be able to access it. We want to be able to, so this product, in our mindset as a sort of ecosystem, it's targeted at the global enterprise. But if you look at the scale of fast-growing companies that are technology companies, they're young, their founders are young, they're coming in, they don't really understand what the legal implications are, what the facilities are in different countries. And so they probably realise 3, 4, 5 years too late. By then, they're incurring penalties, they're incurring fines, they're realising they have to undo a lot of everything. Whereas this technology resolves that issue. It addresses the issue of the next generation who want to press buttons. It addresses the issue of quality and verification of data. And it also addresses the employee engagement, employee user experience, which every company is looking for.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think from an in-house perspective, I'm sure if there are global mobility in-house teams here, Petya smiling at me. So I think the main challenge that we have when we are not looking at technology is the speed of getting the response from the providers that we're working with, the cost to get that response, because if we have to reach out to 3 or 4 different companies to come up with a solution, it's going to cost us 3 or 4 times that fee. And generally knowing that we're getting the expert advice as well. So if we're getting a solution which is all encompassing, that would really speed up, our responses to the business and get us to, focus on other things that we can be doing with that time rather than pulling together the information. Ernie, would you be able to add to what Emily and Asma mentioned, please?
Yeah, I just think very much to what you were saying. We're looking at a time where kind of lines are being blurred in terms of what's happening, and this is where I think technology can help, but also it needs some experience look behind it. So I think back when we started this business, it was very simple to look at what was a short-term assignment, long-term assignment, business traveler. Now that you put remote working in there, all the lines are blurred. You don't really know what's happening. So let's give an example. We go to some employees and say we want to send so-and-so employees to this other country and live there and work there short or long term. But then what if there were volunteers that said, I'll just go because maybe I'm originally from that country, or maybe I want to work there. Or maybe I'll go sometimes and then work back in my home country other times. When do you then decide that this is an assignment versus a volunteer system where someone's remotely working? So we get into this very gray area that wasn't around before because technology didn't allow us to work remotely. We needed to be in an office with a team. And so this is where I think the platform is really going to help us out. It does need a lot of judgment though. It doesn't mean just that we're going to get the data. We're now going to have to interpret that data and see how it fits in with immigration and tax.
Yeah, I think your job, I'm afraid to say, is getting a lot harder. Because it used to be, the mobile population would be, say 1% of the company. Now it could be anybody, right? Because we talk about employee experience, no one's saying, right, only that population of people can work remotely. It's pretty much a free-for-all. If people are asking, yeah, I'm going to work remotely.
Yeah.
What are you going to allow? How are you going to deal with that? From a traditional mobility department perspective, you don't have the bandwidth to deal with going from 1 to 3% of the population of your employees to potentially 100% of your employees. And so it's how do you manage that? The other thing with talking about the technology, obviously, is then you have data, but then, you how do you get that control? And that's the challenge. We're building technology to help, but it can still go outside of that. The line manager says, well, we're allowed to approve this. Yes, you can go and work in Italy for 10 days. But then if it comes to you and you're trying to send that person to Italy later in the year, do you know that they've been there for 10 years? And unfortunately, you're going to have to go almost back in time, even with all the technological advances, and trust your employees and say, all right, where have you been?
I think some companies say that they allow for remote working as long as there's no risk, but where is there no risk? We were talking about this earlier, that from the number of days that you're in the country, it's not just about your remote assignment, it's also about how many business trips have you taken into that location, have you had personal travel into that location. So this goes sort of to what Ernie was saying about the lines being really blurred. And I think the point is that you have to enable the businesses to see some of the compliance risks that might pertain for a given situation. I think in the example it was Juan Carlos. So, Juan Carlos is moving from Mexico to Germany. There could be an employment law consideration. There is an immigration consideration. There could be a tax consideration. And you need to arm the mobility teams with that information so they can have this strategic discussion with the business, but it doesn't eliminate still that need for a person on the other end that is the local expert that's going to manage the application of the immigration and track the number of days and consult and let you know when there's a red flag, when something else happened. I have this really great example of before I became on the more immigration and tech side, when I worked in the tax side, working at a really large company that managed international tax, having a counterpart in another country that was managing the immigration, and the two firms, even though they're under one name, didn't speak to each other. And it wasn't until we were preparing this individual's tax a year later that we found out that even though this was a person who was from, say, Mexico to Germany, they also were a US green card holder. And because they'd stayed outside of the country for so long, they were losing their right to be a US green card holder. And it only came up because the tax team was looking at it and the person said, how do I file my US taxes? So really having that cohesive experience where the firms are talking to each other, the partners are partnering the way that you would expect is really important.
I mean, I have both worked also in a Big Four, and also we have worked with Big Four throughout my career, Big Fours throughout my career, and I would say that the main challenge that we have is, even though they're one company, they actually don't necessarily share the information with each other. And also, they may be good in some countries, and they might have, good experts in certain countries, but they don't have it globally, and we're global organisations, and where we don't get that support, or the expertise, we do suffer as the client, and because we can't take the risk for, 5 countries to be amazing and 20 to not, have experts. So from my side, I personally would be interested in, hearing more about this system, because actually what sets you apart from the Big Four is that you have your own networks. So you bring best experts across the world, both, as you said, GTN, and I know Centuro do the same because, they support us with immigration as well. So it's something that is not out there at the moment, and it's a real challenge for us because as in-house mobility teams, we need to have experts everywhere, because we can't not give correct advice just because the Big Four don't cover that area, for instance. So I think this is music to my ears, and I'm sure to a lot of companies out here who are truly global in their mobile populations. So how would you, think that you can continue on this trajectory going forward? Because of course you're going to be creating this, but how are you going to maintain and keep it up so that we don't lose, changes that are going to happen in technology and all of that sort of stuff? Because that's also something that's quite important for us. We don't want the system to be working necessarily today and then kind of be irrelevant in a year.
No, absolutely. I think it's really important to understand that when you're looking at the bigger companies, they also have a network, right? It's under one brand name, but actually they're still operating as a network. So for us, the one thing to understand is you've got to address so many issues. You've got to address sustainability, you've got to address like a purpose of why you're doing what you're doing. So it's really important to say that we are looking at best-in-class firms around the world. So GTN has their own network, so it's bringing in another 150 firms into the network who are specialists in their area. We have legal experts, and these are firms who are really good in their own countries, right? So they understand, they're not global firms, but they're best in their countries. So not only are we enhancing the economies of those countries and sending, we can now, as a collaborative ecosystem, we can now all go in and get, and compete for work, which the bigger consultancies have. Now, governments around the world, if you look at the UAE a few years ago, and if you look at some of the Sarbanes-Oxley rules as well about consulting firms, there is no real competitor in the market. So we're here to disrupt.
Yeah.
And what we want to do is we want to create something that is a serious alternative. Now, the bigger firms, risk averse, all of those things, procurement teams love going to firms that they don't have, tick all the boxes and they don't have to worry. But actually this technology will be transforming. And our vision is to create something that really, really makes a noise in the industry. It simplifies, it eases, it brings the ecosystem together. So not just tax and immigration, legal, EOR space. That's a great space, right? So these are young companies that are really rapidly growing. It fits and it gels well with what we're trying to achieve as well. We're there to manage their risk, their compliance, answer any questions, to make sure that everything that's happening, people that are being employed and deployed into different countries are actually compliant. I mean, we had an example of a query that we had, and somebody was continually, a number of companies were employing people in a certain jurisdiction, and they were doing it for 2 years, and they've suddenly been hit with the biggest fine that you will ever think. And it's because they were in breach of employment law in the country, and they didn't know. But yet that didn't prevent the fine from being issued and them being barred from the country. So it is still going on. Governments are still clamping down, but maybe it's taking longer because COVID has prevented that from happening. But now, as governments are keeping more clued on, they're using automation to understand where people are, where they've been, who's responsible for what. I think risk and compliance becomes a really big area.
I think that to add to that as well, I mean, one of the concerns people are going to have in the next few years is about how AI and ChatGPT and everything is actually being used by professional services firms. And I read an article from the president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales the other day, and it caught my eye because it said, you know, is AI the death of the accountant? And obviously I thought, well, better read this because that is what I do. And anyway, it was quite interesting, but it was talking about how tax and accounting profession can utilise the technology to enhance their services, like know your client checks and things like that, and content creation, but that it wasn't going to replace actually qualifying the information. And I think he referred to ChatGPT as an ill-informed but very confident junior accountant, in that it produced beautiful content that you thought, wow, this is great. But actually, was it 100% correct or not? And it needs somebody behind that to actually qualify and say, okay, we can get all this content now, but we still have to qualify, we still have to make sure, pick out the bits that are right, pick out the bits that aren't quite so accurate, but harness it and utilize it. But the technology tools, behind that are real people and real experts. We're not saying replace experts with technology, we're saying utilize technology to make it, getting the expertise more accessible and link it all together in one platform. And I think that's really important because, if you do log onto the Centuro platform, there are people. It's not just AI bots that are doing all the work. It's qualified professionals. Just a way of bringing everyone together, really.
It's interesting. Dex, our great COO and data privacy officer in the US, we were talking about AI the other day and the ability to track. I think it was the emotional response to service. There was somebody who was talking about that in the industry and things, and Dex had been at a COO conference the day before, and he said, by the way, at yesterday's COO conference, they said AI will create the greatest number of data privacy court cases that the world has ever seen in the next 3 to 5 years. So you kind of have to still have people behind it, people looking at things. AI is fantastic to get the quick answer, but then having the team to deploy behind it is going to be, it's essential. You can't just rely on it. Yeah.
And I think to your question about sort of what's the trajectory, what's the future, I think we've started sort of with global mobility tax and immigration because that's largely what we're hearing in the market today, and it's not an easy win, but it's a noticeable win. But I think the scope of the global mobility in-house expert is growing every couple of years. It started with, posted workers, and then business travelers, and then remote workers, and you get pulled into more and more strategic conversations. And so I think that scope also goes into, like Asma was saying, employment law, and it's going to go into corporate tax eventually, and it's going to, so I think the trajectory of the tool and what we're building with this ecosystem, to say for probably the 10th time in the panel, is
My favorite word.
more experts that are around the world that are true experts in their own right, because that scope is going to keep growing.
Well, Khadeeja, we were talking last week in Boston at the conference. We were saying, what is mobility now? Is it a function? Is it a skill set? Is it an overarching philosophy? It's sort of changed, right? It used to be transactional. Now it's becoming very much
Strategic.
like a quarterback role. Sorry to use an American phrase. I'm getting all American after my 23 years there. But what is that role going to be in the future? Because there are so many elements that are coming into it. like I said, with the width of remote work, you know, the number of departments you need to work with is just exploded, right? It's
Yeah.
incredible.
It's more global workforce planning, we like to call it. Brilliant. Conscious of time, does anyone have any questions for our panel?
Sorry to keep asking questions, but my background is partly with multinationals and also with the big business. I've worked around the world with quite a bit. One of the issues is part of the word operating contribution, because quite often, you know, individual countries have their own P&L, and so therefore when I've done outsourcing too, so there's a kind of often a salary differential between moving an American or UK person to, I don't know, Eastern Europe or China or something like that. So how's that side of things coped with in performance management, taking a US expert and moving them to, I don't know, Hungary or something?
If AI can give us the return on investment on assignments, I'm going to retire a very rich man. Let's put it that way. Yeah, there is still that return on investment on assignments is it's like the holy grail of the industry. It is the problem with developing technology that would measure that is that it is so industry specific, almost business specific. Because okay, what is the value of putting this US expert in China for this amount of time? How do you measure that? You know, there are, you know, I'm an economics background, but in terms of my university training, the economic metric to model that is almost impossible. You know, how...
It's beyond.
Well, but it is, but then you've got the knock-on performance, you've got the retention of the expat when they get back, which is traditionally very low. You've got the direct costs, you've got the skill transition. It's impossible. It's almost impossible to judge ROI. It's people have tried and many have failed. Let's put it that way. If I was a smarter man, I'd go for it, but it's a big challenge still.
I think without giving too much away as well, we do actually have a global mobility panel later today, and we're going to touch on this. I think if Pete Knight, if he's in here, this is something that he and I have had a conversation about quite a lot, and so please do come back for that panel.
Brilliant. Anybody else? Perfect. Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you to the panel as well.